Let's try that again. I was on mute there. Good morning. This is Father Mark. I want to say welcome from my office here at the Cathedral Convent. And as we come together this morning for some time of conversation, it's a real privilege to be here with you. My heart is really filled with joy to think that so many of us from across the diocese will be tuning in, whether that would be individually or in groups in parishes across the diocese. Many of you who are watching today have already come to closure and to clarity that the Lord is calling you into a new ministry in your parish with adult formation. Some of you may be watching with a discerning heart, continuing to ask if this is the call that God has placed in your life. Many of you are watching this live on Saturday morning. Some of you may be watching this in a tape delay later on, but however you're watching it, whatever brings you here this morning, I just want to say welcome. It's great to have you with us this morning. A few things to kind of give us some orientation this morning. First of all, if you are watching in a group, it's great to be together. There will be times during our conversation this morning that you will have the opportunity to have some conversation with each other. For those of you who are watching alone, there will also be breaks in the midst of the morning where we'll give you some time to pray. As you are watching this morning, we would encourage you, as you feel called, to go ahead and give us an email, shoot us a question, give us a comment, let us know how things are registering in your heart. Let me show you how we're going to do that. I'm going to share the screen here with you just for a second and go to our website. And you should be able to now see our website on your screen. If you go to our homepage, which is htdiocese.org, and you scroll down the homepage just a little bit to the left is where you actually clicked on to watch this live stream. Over here, this blue button right here, click this blue box to email Father Mark a question. That is going to take you straight to an open email dialog box on your computer, and you'll send that question to Kristen. Kristen will then receive that question. She'll vet them out, kind of group them, and then we'll answer those accordingly. So if at any point you want to send an email to us, go ahead and just click that blue box on our homepage, and that will take you to Kristen there. Again, it's great to be with you this morning as we come together to celebrate. Also want to walk you through just a little tour of what we're going to be doing this morning as we come together and walk through our first conversation in regards to adult formation. You should be seeing now on your screen just a little PowerPoint that's going to, I think, be helpful for us. Again, welcome. It's great to be with all of you. I first want to say just a word of gratitude to so many of you for your generosity, for the way that you have trusted the process so far. Many of you are listening today. You are very familiar with the contours of strategic planning. This is perhaps not the first time that you have been with us. For many of you, this might be your first introduction to not necessarily the concept of strategic planning, but perhaps it is your first introduction to, you might say, the details therein, to the vision and the specific way that God might be calling your parish into some renewal. Wherever you are on the spectrum, I just want to say welcome, and I want to say it's great to be with you this morning. Bishop Fobb has said repeatedly throughout the strategic plan that time is one of those things that we never get back, and time is something that I know is very precious to all of us. We want to use your time well this morning, and so I am going to spend most of the time this morning not only with you, but allowing you to see some slides that are going to give you some information. So I'll toggle back and forth between you being able to see the webcam and also allowing you to see some screens that have some specific information. I think that's enough for us. And how about we just jump in together this morning and let's ask the Lord to bless us as we pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. You could pray this prayer with me if you can see it on your screen. If not, just let the words that are anchored in the Second Vatican Council and the way that they started every one of those beautiful sessions of discernment kind of guide us there. Holy Spirit, we ask that you come in power and renew every church parish in the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux with the fire of your love. In particular today, we ask your blessing upon our strategic planning. Draw us together as one. Strengthen the bond between our priest and laity, and allow our unity to be a prophetic sign for our times. Empower us in every way that we might listen, discern, and follow you wherever you might lead us. May your kingdom come and your will be done. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Well, let's take a look at what our day is going to look like today. You might say our agenda for our first time together on this Saturday morning. The first thing that we're going to walk through is just kind of putting things into context. You might say putting first things first, which is our responding to a person and not to a program. After that, we'll cast a vision and we'll look at the big picture of formation for the church, for a diocese, for your parish. After that, we'll have some Q&A, specifically around your role in adult formation, specifically what the Lord has called you to discern. And we'll look at some of the most commonly asked questions, and we'll further take questions from you via email. After that, we'll talk about how to get started, you might say, and the difference between teachers and witnesses, how this all starts with you, your heart, and the amazing opportunity that God has for you in your life. And then finally, we'll talk about our homework, and specifically talk about what's next so that we can be best prepared for our first gathering in October. Let's dive a little deeper and take a look at specifically some of the things that we're going to be speaking of today, so that as you have questions in your heart, you might know where some of those questions might naturally already be answered. Of course, you can email any of your questions. If you go again to the homepage, if you're joining us late, there's a blue box on the homepage of our website where you can click and send an email to me, and we'll answer those today. So again, first things first, responding to a person or program, we're going to do 3 things within each of our major sections. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the person who has called you. The second thing is reminding us that we can trust the person. And the third thing that we're going to discuss is that it's about people and not about a program. It's about a person specifically, not just about programs. Next, we'll cast a vision, looking at the big picture of formation. Specifically, when we do that, we'll talk about the purpose of the parish is forming disciples. We'll quickly walk through the 5 dimensions of forming disciples, and then we'll zero in on the art of living. Next, as we go through our Q&A, we will specifically talk about the difference between leaders and mentors, what those are, what those aren't, and how you can rest in those 2 words. Specifically, we'll talk about what you have been asked to do beginning in 2018. We'll walk through some commonly asked questions. Then, as we talk about teachers and witnesses and how formation starts with you, we will take a look at our Saturdays together, the PMD, Parish Missionary Disciple Program, which is facilitated by CLI, the Catholic Leadership Institute, and we'll take a look specifically at what these Saturdays look like. Finally, as we look at our homework and we talk about what's next, we'll talk about the importance of prayer, learning more about strategic planning, and getting you ready for our first weekend together. So that's our agenda. At the end of it, we'll take some further questions from you, asking that you just feel free to share your hearts with us and make sure that today is serving you well. As we walk through the day, each presentation will be about 15 to 20 minutes. And at the end of the presentation, I'd like to take about 5 minutes in silent reflection. So depending on where you are and who you're with, that might be a little bit easier, but that will be something that we will do together as we enter into formation. One of my favorite lines in the Catechism as it's talking about meditation, and specifically the meditation that comes with a specific style of prayer called Lectio Divina, says that when we meditate on something, another book is opened, the book of life. You might say in that analogy that the book of the Bible is really designed to open up the book of life. The book of theology is really designed to open up the book of life. And it's the book of life that we read in lieu of the Bible or in lieu of theology. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today might stir up things in your heart. And the Lord, who's called us, might want to meet you there today. So as you're listening to the details of this presentation, I would encourage you most of all to listen to the rhythm of your life and the rhythm of your heart. So how about we dive in together. And let's take a look at first things first, responding rather than to a program. And as we said earlier, in the next 15 to 20 minutes, what we'd like to do is talk about the person who has called you, of course, how we can trust a person, and it's about a person and not about programs. I'd like to draw us first, as we talk about the person, into one of my favorite quotes from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 2567, that says, and I'll read this with you, God calls man first. Man may forget his creator or hide far from his face. He may run after idols or accuse God of having abandoned him. Yet the living and true God tirelessly calls each person to that mysterious encounter known as prayer. In prayer, God's initiative of love always comes first. Our own first step is always a response. Just let you maybe take a look at that quote, maybe find a word or phrase that most speaks to you. God calls us first, it says, right? And I love that litany, that fourfold litany in the next two lines, right? That sometimes we forget God or hide from God, or sometimes we run after our idols or even accuse God of having left us alone. And man, if any of those four patterns connect with your experience, then you can join great company, because I think a lot of my life is like that also. I get busy. I forget God. I hide from where he's calling me. I have my own idols, and sometimes I kind of lash out at God with how difficult life can be. And I mean, if any of those four things connect with you, then I just want to say welcome to the human race. I think we're all there together. But here's the beauty of it all. It says that the living and true God tirelessly calls each person to that mysterious encounter known as prayer. That's just really good news. Not only does God call, but God tirelessly calls us. You think about who is reaching out to you. God's the one who's reaching out to you. And the scriptures say, the Catechism teaches that God doesn't just reach out to us, but he's always reaching out to us. He's forever calling us into relationship. He's always calling us into growth. He tirelessly calls us. He never gets tired of calling us. And so what the church is trying to tell us there is that God's initiative of love always comes first, right? We are constantly responding to a God who is actively taking an interest in our life. God is the one who's taken the initiative in strategic planning and the invitation that has been placed before you for formation. And of course, in the lives of all those that we will inevitably walk with. God is the one who's taken the initiative. So the question for us is who called you? Not a trick question here. Did your pastor call you? Did the bishop call you? Or did Jesus Christ call you? And I kind of playfully walk us through those questions today, because I think it's important to know that Jesus Christ is the one who has brought you into this conversation today. And that's just a great place for us to start, because that's really good news, right? So as we talk about details of formation, as we talk about how you can serve God in the kingdom, just know that the reason that you are engaged in this conversation right now is because God loves you, because God's calling you. And if God calls us, of course, he's never going to kind of leave us there. And so that kind of brings us to the next part of our conversation, which is the fact that we can trust the person, right? So if a person has called you, then I just want you to be encouraged today to hear the good news today that you can trust the person. And if you might just give me permission just for a second, I know that some of us who are watching this conversation in the first 15 minutes, like you might feel a little intimidated by what you think you're saying yes to, or you might feel unworthy, or maybe you just have a little natural hesitation and fear. Perhaps you know yourself better than anybody else, and you're wondering if you've made a mistake in saying yes, so you don't feel worthy, or maybe you're just afraid of the call. Hey, we're in this together, and I want to remind you, you can trust the person. What do you think the most common response to God's call is? It's fear. Okay, let me walk you through a couple incidences from the Bible, right? Abraham, Moses, David. When all three of those beautiful legends of the Old Testament were called by God to serve him and to do something really beautiful for him, what do you think the most common response was? Was fear, right? Like Moses came up with all kinds of reasons why God should not send him to Pharaoh. Moses came up with all kinds of reasons why he wasn't worthy or wasn't good enough. In fact, the very first time he was in God's presence in general, he was afraid. Not only were the three of them afraid, but look at the New Testament. Mary, the Blessed Mother. It's the first thing that we hear from her heart as God reaches out to her in the Annunciation, right? And the angel Gabriel, right off the bat, says, hey, do not be afraid. Peter, when Jesus saw Simon cleaning his nets by the shore of the Sea of Galilee, remember the first thing that Peter felt in his heart when he said to Jesus, when he saw the miracle? He says, depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. Now, when I look at the names that are on that screen right now, that's some pretty powerful stories of the glory of God, right? When I look at the transformation in St. Paul's life and the way that the evangelization of the world can somehow trace its roots in either Peter or Paul, I glory at what God can do in simple people's lives. So the question is not, are we afraid? That's just because we're human. The question is, who's with us in the fear, right? I'll be honest with you, like I look at some of the things God is asking me to do, and I feel inadequate or don't feel equipped for it, and I'm afraid, and I just know this to be true, right? When we fear God's call, we're looking at the call, not the caller. Let me just stay there for a second, okay, right? When we fear God's call, we're often looking at the call, not the caller. Right? So Moses, go to Moses. Like Moses feels the call to go to Pharaoh, and instead of just keep looking at God, he's looking at Pharaoh, right? He's looking at like how big that task is going to be. And you know what I know to be true about my life is that when I'm intimidated by maybe a new pastoral assignment or aspects of a pastoral assignment or conversations that I have to have with people that I love or just in general, man, when I'm looking at the call, there can be a lot of fear. But when I'm looking at the caller, I just know that God can be trusted. God can always be trusted. Even if the call elicits fear, I can trust the one who's calling. My history tells me this, right? Every time I've been afraid in the past and I've turned to God, he's always been there for me. And so I just encourage all of us today that as we are talking about a person, not about a program, as we're talking about a person who's with us, I just want you to know that you can trust the person. And that's a good thing, because a lot of the people that we're going to be walking with in the future, they may feel the same type of fear, either in the formation process or maybe even as God is calling them. And if we are able to have the courage in our natural experience, with all the natural things that pop up in our experience, to turn to God, then I just think that we're not only going to be more equipped to walk with them, but in some way we'll kind of give them a little icon of what it's like when God can do awesome things to ordinary people. So be not afraid, right? So the first thing is for us to know that a person is called you. Number two, it's just for us to be reminded that we can trust the person. And finally, It's about a person and not about the programs. I just want to remind us about that as we talk about some of the programs that are already available to you through strategic planning, why we believe in the Dr. Brent Petrie resource that's there, more coming in regards to that. We're going to talk about a very specific series of resources today in the art of living, but in the end, it's not about the resource or the program, it's about the person. In the last 15 years, I've been a priest for 16 years, and I've had almost 15 years of leading silent retreats. And you just imagine maybe some of the things that you felt if you have been on a silent retreat. Often, as a retreat's coming to its conclusion, people have a natural fear that pops up. A lot of times on the last day of spiritual direction, last day of retreat, people ask questions. They say to me, Father Mark, I'm nervous about going home, going back to the real world. Now, of course, you and I think, can agree today that we both know what the real world is, right? That's more real than in the encounter with the person Jesus Christ and what God reveals to us. But hey, I understand the very natural nervousness, the natural fear that might be a part of any leaving retreat. I've been there myself. And what I often tell people is this. I usually respond by saying, hey, 3 things happened on retreat. Number 1, you had a desire for God. God had a desire for you. And the retreat created a favorable environment for the first 2 to come together. Let me say that again. 3 things happen on every retreat. Number 1, we have a desire for God. God has a desire for us. And we're just in a favorable environment, in the silence, perhaps in the getting away, in the spiritual direction. There's just a favorable environment for those first 2 things to come together. And so what happens on a retreat is it's not magic. It's just there's a favorable environment for the heart of a human being to connect with the Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ. Programs, good ones, really just create a favorable environment for God's desire for us and for our desire for God to come together. So it's not about the DVD or the video, or it's not about the weekend, or it's not about anything. Programs, what happens in parishes a lot of times, successful programs just create a favorable environment for 2 people to connect, and that's us and God. And if we can just hold on to that truth, then what we're pursuing in adult formation is not the right program, but what we're trying to do is create a favorable environment in our parishes where all of our people's hunger for God and God's insatiable hunger for us can come together. The good news, I think, for all of us as we're listening today is there's a lot of hungry people in our parishes, aren't there? The results of the Disciple Maker Index, remember the DMI, that 88 question survey that many of us took in March of this past year. The results from the DMI indicate that there's an extraordinary hunger in our diocese. In fact, one of the questions that was really important, I think says it best. 44% of the people in our diocese who responded explicitly said that they would take the next step with God if we showed them how and made it easy. 44% of the people who responded said that they are hungry for God, that they have a desire for God, right? 100% of what we know about God tells us that God is hungry for us and that he has a desire for us. And if you can just imagine today that we have an invitation to create a favorable environment in our parishes, just imagine what might happen to people's lives if God's desire met their desire. And I'm just really encouraged, and I just want to say thank you today for being here with us as we talk about how to create a favorable environment in our parishes in adult formation where God can do great things. So the question I just want you to think about just for a second is how do you feel about being called? You know, before we talk about X's and O's, just encourage you to maybe look at your heart right now. just for a second. Give you a couple minutes in silence right now. I want you to just let yourself lean in to the power of the prophet Jeremiah. Of course, God says this to Jeremiah and to Israel in a key time in their history, but what he says to Israel, he says to us, right? So he says, I know well the plans I have in mind for you. Plans for welfare, right? To give you a future full of hope. Just imagine that God has for you a future full of hope. He knows what he wants to give you, and the call that he's placed in your heart is to only lead you to a future full of hope. And if you can get in touch with what's in your heart around the call, look at this next line, right? When you call me and you come to pray, I will listen to you. And when we look to him, rather than the call, when we look to him, you will find me, he says. In fact, when you search me with all your heart, I will let you find me. So if we're going to search for God with all of our heart, we have to be honest with what's in our heart. So maybe just the next 2 minutes in silence, just look inside your heart and ask yourself, what's in your heart as you consider being called? Again, just giving you a couple seconds in silence to pray. If you're with some other people right now, if you're with a group and everybody there has had a chance to maybe just to kind of maybe share with each other a little bit of what's in your heart. If you're alone, then maybe just stay with the Lord. We'll give you about another 90 seconds, 2 minutes of silence, or for some group conversation, and then we'll begin with our next piece of the conversation. Again, great to be with you as we celebrate the fact that in some way God has called you here. There's really good news for all of us today that we can trust the caller. And so, if nothing else registers in your heart today and you can just rest and relax a little bit more, then praise God for that. It's really important to know also that that God can can only meet us where we are, right? We don't have to be a certain place. I learned a long time ago that the only place to start is to. If, as you're praying your way through these next few weeks and months, it's just important for you to feel the freedom to share with the Lord anything in your heart. So whether fear is there or not, it's not about if it's there. It's about being free to take that to the Lord, whatever that might be. So, all right, let's kind of move on to our next part of the conversation. Casting the vision, looking at the big picture of where we are when it comes to formation. Now, if you might give me permission today, a special comment to those who have heard this presentation before. We are about to have a conversation right now about the purpose of the parish and forming disciples. And some of you who might be very familiar with this piece of strategic planning, maybe you've heard this before. So I want you to stay with me for a second, because if you've heard this before, my encouragement to you now, it's a little challenge, is to see if you can start anticipating what I'm going to say. This next part of the presentation, these next 20 to 25 minutes, is perhaps the most important piece of the entire strategic plan. In fact, it is. And I don't know how we can really move on and talk about adult formation unless we are all on the same page here with what God wants for adult formation, right? This favorable environment. So if you've heard this before, great. It's not new for you. And what you can do today is you can see if you can anticipate where I'm going to go and how you might eventually explain this to other people. If it's new for you, great. Can't wait to tell you the story. And so let's jump in together today by asking a question about the purpose of the parish. And let's answer the question right now. The parish belongs to, and here are our choices, the pastor, the people, or the church. My parish belongs to the people, the pastor, or the church. And what if I would say to you today that the answer to that question is none of those three? Parish belongs to Jesus Christ, right? Whatever the name of your church is, whether it's a Annunciata or a Sacred Heart, whether it's St. Francis or St. Joseph, whether it's St. Andrew and Amelia or Our Lady of the Isle and Grand Isle, every one of those parishes, every one of those churches belongs to Jesus Christ. I've often, in my 16 years of priesthood, heard people say things, and I think I understand where it's coming from. In fact, I've said it myself, like the parish belongs to the people, or the parish belongs to the people. And I understand the passion with which our beautiful people in the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux speak of their parish, but just a reminder that the parish belongs to Jesus. There's a lot of freedom in our lives when we don't expose ourselves to a false responsibility, trying to claim responsibility for something that's not ours, right? Parish belongs to Jesus Christ. It's because Jesus is active and alive. He's real. The beautiful theology of Easter reminds us of that. And so if Jesus is alive, if Jesus is active right now, if Jesus founded the church, then the bishop, the pastor, the people, we're all stewards, right, of what Jesus has given us. Jesus has given us the sacraments, but it's his presence in the sacrament, not ours, right? Jesus has given us the truth, right? But it's not ours to make up. It's his to guide us in, right? We are stewards. So when a steward is somebody who's been given something and entrusted with something, but they act on behalf of someone else. That's the really key part, right? So when we practice stewardship, whether that with time, talent, or treasure, whatever that is, right? We look at the scriptures and the stewards, they were entrusted with something that was not theirs, and yet they acted on behalf of the person who gave them the gift. And so we're stewards of our parishes. And so if we're stewards of our parish, then Jesus, who owns the parish, Jesus, who is one who directs the parish, Jesus wants to partner with us. Now, that's a very different way of looking at the parish than anybody owns the parish. And there's a lot more freedom, right? So our job is to partner with Jesus, who's active and alive, who is engaged with us every second of the day, and who's going to lead us through everything, right? So Jesus wants to partner with us. And so if it's Jesus's parish, it's Jesus's mission. And then the question for us is, well, what's the mission? If it's Jesus' parish, what's the mission that he gave us? And I'd like to take you to the original mission statement for the church. And that comes from Matthew chapter 28. Matthew chapter 28. It says right there in Matthew 28 that the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had ordered them. That Jesus approached and said to them, all power in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always until the end of the age. It's the last thing that Jesus says to his disciples. So the last thing he says is pretty important because it's got to echo throughout all of eternity. The very last things that Jesus says is pretty important. Let's maybe kind of unpack a couple things that I want us to pay particular attention to. Number one, they are at the mountain that Jesus had ordered them. That's a very interesting phrase, isn't it? Like they were ordered to go somewhere. Jesus didn't say, hey, I don't know what you guys are doing next Tuesday, but if you want to kind of hang out, I'll be at the mountain. If you're interested, come hang out with me. Jesus gave them a very specific order, and he doesn't give them many orders. In fact, in all of this, the Gospels, all four Gospels, that language is not usually connected to the way that Jesus speaks to the apostles, but he actually gave them a direct order. And the fact that he gave them such strict instructions reveals to us that what he's going to tell them is really important. Next thing that we know from this is that Jesus has the power. It's been given to him, right? It's really clear that as we look at that, there's not an equal reciprocity between the apostles and Jesus. Jesus is the one who has the authority. And if there's going to be anything that is given to the apostles, it's going to come from Jesus. He's the one who has the authority. And of course, he says to go and make disciples. Of course, we're going to be doing some other things, specifically two, but those two things are actually explaining, you might say, the making disciples piece, all right? So we are to make disciples, and there's two pieces of that that are essential. Number one, we are to baptize and we are to teach. Let's first talk about the baptizing. There is a sacramental dimension to being a disciple, right? So as baptism is the first of the 7 sacraments, there's a sacramental dimension of making disciples. We don't just make disciples on our own. We bring people into a relationship with the church where there are sacraments. And we don't just need the sacraments, right? We also need the teaching. Jesus says that we are to teach people to observe all that he has commanded them. So those two dimensions are part of making disciples, the sacramental component, and you might say the magisterial component or the teaching part of it. And finally, Jesus says that he is with us always. That's great news, right? So we're not supposed to be doing adult formation by ourselves. We're supposed to simply watch Jesus do it in us. But what he wants to do is he calls us to go make disciples of all nations. And specifically, to not simply wait for people to come to us, right? He says, go out with intentionality. Go out with a heart that is specifically designed for this. If the heart of the parish is to create a favorable environment, it is to create a favorable environment for that. That's why we exist. That's the mission of the church, to make disciples. So if it's Jesus's parish, it's Jesus's mission. The question is, what's the mission? The mission is to make disciples. And if you and I are supposed to be making disciples, then we're not supposed to be simply making disciples, but we need to be intentional about making disciples. I had this very distinct moment when I was pastor a few years ago, and was up there kind of preaching away, and sat down after the homily, watching the offertory, and I was amazed the number of people in the congregation who were just in a great spot with God. And then I was stunned when I realized that most of their spiritual growth was happening despite the parish. It was just happening because God is generous and people are generous. And it's not a question of, are people growing in our parish? The question is, are we the ones, right? Our parish, is it because of the favorable environment in the parish that it's happening? So it's about us being intentional about making disciples, not just hearing that. And that intentionality is what our favorable environment needs to be about. So as we look at the purpose of the parish being to form disciples, then the next question, of course, is two natural questions that pop up in the human heart, right? What's a disciple and how do you make one? Those are the two very natural questions that pop up. What's a disciple and how do you make one? Well, our website does list 9 characteristics of a mature disciple, and we'll show you how to find those resources at the end of this conversation. For the sake of our presentation today, I would just let you know that there are 9 aspects of being a mature disciple, and that's what a disciple is according to the church. But I'd like to specifically spend some time today on how do you make one, and specifically, how does that connect to adult formation? Well, we have listened to the Lord, and we have identified 5 dimensions of forming a disciple. 5 dimensions of forming a disciple. In other words, if we're going to make a disciple, we want to understand that the word make is a verb. It's something that we do, right? It requires a movement to make something. It denotes movement. The word make, it's a process. And this process is sequential in the making. If you're going to make a gumbo on a day like today, where the weather is beautiful, you're going to first do this, then you're going to do this, then you're going to do this. And even though you can move in and out of that process, some people are going to brown your sausage and then make your roux. Some people are going to make the roux first, then brown the sausage. There's different ways as you make a gumbo that you might do this first on this time and then this first the next time. But however you do it, there's always a sequential process, right? A sequential steps along the way. And while we're not talking about steps, while we're talking about 5 dimensions of being a disciple, we do want to understand the sequential or the movement in spiritual maturation here. And we've talked about these 5 words over and over in strategic planning, right? To connect, encounter, conversion, grow, mission. And I'd like to unpack those with you now. These 5 dimensions of forming disciples, this is how you make the disciple, is essential for us. So the first is helping people connect with each other. What we have found across the board, as we have done research into what is best helping people grow as disciples in parishes across the country, as we have looked at the process of RCIA, as we have looked at our own lives personally, what we know to be true is that people are more apt to persevere through the process of formation if they are connected to people on an ongoing basis. So this is not simply an initial connection. It's not a one-time only introduction. When we use the word connect, we're talking about developing relationships with people that are specifically in my life to help me grow in my formation, to grow as a disciple. But if I'm connected to other people who are walking with me through the process and supporting me in the process, then I'm more apt to receive the grace that God wants for me in formation. First dimension of formation, first dimension of making a disciple is to connect. Again, if you've heard these 5 words before, see if you can anticipate where I'm going next as we talk about encounter. Encountering the person of Jesus Christ, right? It's what Jesus did. Jesus looked at Simon and said, "Follow me." He looked at Matthew and said, "Follow me." It was his encounter with Mary Magdalene that changed her life. It was the encounter with a woman at the well that fired her heart to share the good news. Over and over and over in the scriptures, we see that people have an encounter with the person of Jesus Christ. An encounter can happen in lots of ways. It can happen on a retreat, in a class. It can happen at Mass or within any sacraments. It can happen as you're driving down the road or in the Adoration Chapel. There's no one method to the encounter because the encounter is a person and not a method. But after people have connected in relationship, we don't want to lead them to each other. We want to lead them to Jesus. And it's this encounter with the person of Jesus that is the fuel for the rest of the process. Of course, what's next is a conversion, right? Even the rich young man in Mark chapter 10 had encountered the person of Jesus, but his inability to move forward in the process was because of his inability to say no. Whenever you and I have an encounter with Jesus, we are drawn in to say yes to relationship. But we all know in the ordinary rhythm of married life or friendship that unless I learn how to say no to the things that threaten the relationship won't move forward and deepen, right? So the yes of encounter is fueled by me learning how to say no to the things that pull me out of my relationship with Jesus Christ. So the first dimension is to connect with people, have an encounter with the person of Jesus Christ. That encounter propels me into a conversion. And then, of course, I have to learn how to live in the grace of the conversion. I have to learn how to live in this new life. I have to learn more about the church, more about the person of Jesus Christ, more about prayer. I have to learn, and as I'm learning, I'm growing in my ability to stay in Jesus and abide with him. Of course, connect. I have an encounter with Jesus that fuels a conversion. I'm growing in my relationship with God. And then that person, Jesus Christ, is going to start walking with me. And he's going to call me to something. Now, when you see the word mission, I caution us to think about a mission trip or to think that we have some big mission that's ours. It's his mission. And there's one mission, to make disciples. Now, whether we're making disciples at home with our kids, whether we are focusing on our vocational call to be a better husband or a better wife, whether we're getting involved in a service or ministry at the church, or whether we're just sharing the good news with people at work, whatever it is, it's up to him, right? It's not discerning different options in life. It's just responding to a person who I, in the process of having an encounter with, it's the person who I'm saying no on a regular basis for. It's the person that's helping me grow. It's a person that's going to call me into mission. This process, these 5 words, is biblical. These 5 things happen to people in the Bible. It's just the way that the Bible explains the forming a disciple. These 5 words is also ecclesial, insofar as it's the church has stated in all the major documents since the Second Vatican Council, that was since the middle of the 20th century. The church has said over and over and over that this is how you make disciples. We said that explicitly. The church has spoken explicitly in Pope Francis in this document, The Joy of the Gospel. And even most recently, the summer of 2017, this summer, when the U.S. bishops wrote a document called Living as Missionary Disciples. So it's biblical, it's in the Bible, and the church has said it. It's ecclesial. Finally, it's anthropological. It's a big fancy word of what does it mean to be human? Now, this is what happens in people's lives. Let me give you an example. When a person falls in love, or when a person just gets to know somebody, right? They connect. And as they stay in a relationship, they may even have a specific encounter with another person. So let's say it's Bob and he meets Brandy. Bob is going to connect with Brandy. Then all of a sudden, Bob might begin to develop feelings for Brandy because of his experience of being in her presence. Let's say Bob has things that are preventing his ability to love Brandy more. Well, he might say no to acting like a bachelor, or he might say no to some of his vices so that he can grow in his relationship with Brandy. As that relationship develops, they get to know more about each other. They learn more about their families and their futures and their passions and their desires. And eventually, you might say they might choose to get married. When you look at Bob and Brandy, the ordinary way that relationships work, people connect with each other, they have an encounter, they have conversions, they grow, and they are called in a mission. The same is true in our relationship with God, right? It's just the way that things are in the human heart. Now we're going to go through these 5 steps our entire life. You might say these dimensions. We're always connecting with people. We're always having an encounter with Jesus. We're always on the process of conversion. We're always growing. He's always calling us. So it's not a one and done thing, but it is something that's important for us to know that kind of flows from the heart of Jesus Christ as we look at formation. These 5 words are the heart of the strategic plan. It is the heart of what you are being called to, and it is the heart of the ministry that you will serve in your parish. These 5 words are more important than the words of a program. These 5 dimensions are what you're going to see happen in the lives of people. These 5 dimensions are more important than anything else that we invite you into. However, we are going to help create the favorable environment. And let's learn a little bit more about the art of living before we pause again. The art of living. Again, these 5 dimensions of forming disciples connect with this favorable environment. How do we create a favorable environment in a parish where God's desire for people and your desire for God come together? How do we create a favorable environment so that connect, encounter, conversion, grow, mission happen? That's the question. How do we create a favorable environment to make disciples? How do we create a favorable environment for spiritual growth, for spiritual maturation? Well, that's what the art of living is all about, and that's what we are inviting you to help us with. What's the best way to form adults? What's the favorable environments to form adults in today's world? Well, let us share with you a couple of things that we have seen and learned as we have been in the strategic planning process. Number one, what seems to be working across the country right now is the aspect of small group. Right, small group is it seems to be one of the best ways to help people connect with each other and stay connected. Again, it's not just about the initial connection, one and done. It's about staying connected, and that small group seems to be just what's working across the country. Number 2, a favorable environment for forming adults is resources that are easy to use on or off campus. I think that in our Catholic imagination, and when we think about adult formation, we think about hosting something at the parish on Tuesday night, you might say. Well, what's working across the country is when people are able to engage in resources off campus, maybe at their house or maybe at somebody else's house, or it's just off campus because it's more convenient for them. And then thirdly, the content is designed so that it moves people through the stages of spiritual growth. So it's not just one Bible study after another Bible study after another Bible study. It's content that's actually specifically intentionally designed to move people through spiritual growth. And if spiritual growth has been articulated in the Bible, by the church, and in our heart as connect, encounter, conversion, grow, mission, then what's working right now in forming adults are resources that help people connect, have an encounter, walk through conversion, grow, and then be equipped for mission. Teach me what my gifts are, right? And tell me how to use them. How do we help move people through that in a small group with resources that are easy to use on or off campus. Other pieces of the favorable environment, and that's working today. When people can share a meal or some type of fellowship, it could be a cup of coffee or a snack or a potluck, whatever it is. If the formation starts with some type of fellowship in small group, right, then moves to people learning something together, and then that moves into small group discussion. Those three aspects of formation are part of the favorable environment. And so we are using the language of the art of living. Let me tell you where that comes from. This is a long quote, but with your permission, I'd like to share it with you. It comes from Pope Benedict when he was a cardinal under John Paul II. He said this in the year 2000. He said, "Human life cannot be realized by itself. Our life is an open question, an incomplete project still to be brought to fruition and realized. Each of us has a fundamental question. How can this be realized? How can I maximally become who I'm supposed to be, right? Becoming man." He says, how does one learn the art of living, which is the path to happiness? To evangelize means to show this path, to teach the art of living. At the beginning of his public life, Jesus says, I've come to evangelize. This means I have the response to your questions. I will show you the path of life. Rather, I am the path of life. I love what the Pope says next. Listen to this. He says, the deepest poverty is the inability of joy, the tediousness of a life considered absurd and contradictory. This poverty is widespread today in very different forms in the materially rich as well as the poor. The inability of joy presupposes and produces the inability to love, produces jealousy and avarice. Just stop there for a second. Imagine, Pope is talking about evangelization, and he's talking about joy. In other words, he's saying that if we're going to evangelize, it's got to be connected to this innate desire to be happy, right? What every one of us wants in life, we want to be happy. And Pope Benedict is connecting this longing for happiness, this longing for joy to be the very heart of evangelization, right? And I go back to the quote. He says, this is why we are in need of a new evangelization. Now, listen to this. He says, if the art of living remains an unknown, nothing else works. But this art is not the object of a science. Just do this and you'll be happy, right? This art can only be communicated by a person, the one who has life. Pope Benedict says that, how is it that I'm going to have the path to happiness? It says this path, you have to teach me the art of living. To evangelize, he says, is to teach the art of living. It's about the art of living, and that's what we're essentially we're talking about here. So how do we make a disciple? Well, we're going to teach people the art of living. As we're making disciples, we're teaching them how to live, how to do what? How to connect, encounter, conversion, grow mission. That's what we're teaching. So the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux is very excited to invite you into a really beautiful resource that we are developing right now. It's called the Art of Living. The Art of Living is 4 semesters, you might say. It's 4 topics. I'd say it's 4 building blocks. Each semester is about 8 to 10 weeks. Or each teaching, you might say, is 8 to 10 weeks, designed to be done once a week, just like many of the resources you're familiar with. There's a fall and a spring, and then there's another fall and spring. So it's 4 semesters, you might say, over 2 years, starting in the fall, then a spring and a fall, and then another spring. What is the art of living? It's around 4 topics, 4 questions that we're going to answer, right? The first is, who am I? What's the purpose of my life? What do I really want out of life? That's the anthropology piece. Second piece is about, who is Jesus? And what does Jesus teach me about who I am? Third is on prayer and conversion, right? Teach me how to pray. Teach me what I need to say no to. Then the fourth is on integration, living with Christ. So the Art of Living is 4 semesters, right? So it's anthropology, Christology, prayer and conversion, integration. Again, we bring it back to that right there, right? Those are the 4 semesters that unfold during the Art of Living. So in the first semester, we're going to connect people to each other, and the grace is that we're facilitating the encounter. Semester 2, again, connecting people to each other, helping them have an encounter with Jesus. Third semester is on prayer and conversion, and that is deepening the encounter and having the conversion. And then the last semester is helping people grow, learning how to stay in the conversion and being equipped for mission. So watch how this unfolds again. The Art of Living is going to actually move people, walk with people, invite people, show people how to go through all 5 dimensions. Watch it again, right? Semester 1, connect and encounter. Semester 2, connect and encounter. Semester 3, encounter conversion. Semester 4, grow in mission. So if somebody in a parish walks through all 4 semesters, they would have sequentially and systematically been led through all 5 dimensions of what it means to be a disciple. That's really, really exciting. And so all 5 of those dimensions would be more active in a person's life. It is free to our diocese. This resource that we're going to be providing is free to our diocese. It's going to be on our the web, just like the Brent Petrie stuff is now, about 30-minute teachings. And there's going to be a workbook, which will include the notes and some questions, homework, and how to pray with the material. It's going to be small group based. So these 4 semesters, we're going to really encourage people to be in small groups. Now, these small groups can be on or off campus. This could be a married couple or married couples doing this together. It could be people who are showing up on a Tuesday night to do it in the parish, whenever that is. It can be small groups that are meeting on the campus or off campus, and each of these is going to have a small group leader. As we look at the big picture now, and the question for you is, what do you think about the process? And where are you in the process? Let's maybe take about 5 minutes now, just in silence. I know there was a lot to process, but just stay with those 2 simple questions, okay? Where are you in the process? Where are you with your own connection with God, or your encounter with Him, or your conversion, or your growth, or the clarity of the mission? And what do you think about the 5 words? Again, we can answer questions specifically about everything we just talked about with the Art of Living, but maybe just for the next 5 minutes, stay right there in those questions and spend some time with the Lord. Again, as you find yourself listening today, I would encourage you to email us any questions that you might have. Again, if you don't know how to send that email to us, we would encourage you. Hey, how y'all doing over there? I would encourage you to go to our website. And if you go to the website, you'll see this blue box on the bottom of the homepage. Just scroll down, blue box right here that says, click this blue box to send an email to Father Mark, and that'll go to Kristen. Kristen's going to be taking those questions for us right now and making sure that we get those answers that are going to help you out. Again, just give you a couple more seconds to think things through. And that's a lot there, but this presentation is online for you as you may want to review it in the future, but also available to you as you look at some of the notes that we've been talking about. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look now at where we are. So we did first things first, right? We responded. We talked about responding to a person in a program. We cast a vision for you. That might have been a lot for you, but again, you can go back and reread that, or I can answer some questions specifically about that. If you have questions specifically about the 5 or the art of living, you can send those questions to Kristen. Let's just for a moment, as we take a look at now in the next, let's say 25 minutes, your role. And you can email us lots of questions now, because I know a lot of you have questions about this. Now let's first talk about the leaders and mentors, all right? Some of this language may be familiar to you, but let's talk about what that is, all right? So the art of living, one more time, right? Okay, it's gonna be small group based. So in the fall of 2018, when we released the art of living, it's not just going to be out there where people can just do it on their own. We are encouraging people to get into small groups. Strong push, recruitment, you might say an invitation for people to be in small groups. They can do it on or off campus, but every small group isn't going to need a small group leader, right? What's a typical night look like? Now, again, this could be during the day. It doesn't have to be at night. It doesn't have to be at the church. It can be on or off campus. But whenever people get together to engage with the resource, about the first 30 minutes is a gathering of some form. It could be a meal. It could be just some snacks, some coffee. Could just be some socializing. But there's some fellowship before we actually use the resource. So that's the most important thing. Don't get coked up on the meal's got to be this or that. It doesn't have to be a meal. It just has to be something that is natural socializing for the small group. Then about the next 30 minutes, this is not an exact science here, but the next 30 minutes, you're going to watch the video. There's a teaching. You're going to learn. And then the next piece is small group discussion. That could take about a half hour, could take 45 minutes. But that's what a typical, you might say, experience looks like. So that's one. And again, for every aspect of the art of living, we're going to have 8 to 10 teachings per semester. So, this is going to happen every week whenever we meet, right? So if we're going to have small groups, we're going to need small group leaders. Now, let's draw you a picture here, and maybe you've seen this picture a little bit before, and let's get familiar with what you're looking at here. Okay, so at the bottom, small groups provide a favorable environment where adults can learn together, stay connected to people, right? So small groups are important. Small groups are led by a small group leader, right? So if I'm in a small group, I've got, 5 to 8, maybe 5 to 10 adults in my small group. One of us is going to be the designated leader. What does the leader do? The leader kind of facilitates conversation. The leader might do the organizational work to help the formation unfold. The leader is going to be the contact for the parish, give us a feel on what's happening in the parish. The small group leader needs to be trained, though, right? Because we're asking them to do some important work. And so the question is, who's forming the small group leader? Well, that's what mentors do. Mentors are trained small group leaders. And that's a really beautiful invitation. And that's what we're going to train you to do. We're going to train you to do a really important ministry in the parish. And so if you feel like you're ready for that, awesome. If you feel called to it, but you just don't know how to do that, That's okay. We're not asking you to do anything that we're not going to show you how to do. We're not asking you to do anything we're not going to model for you. We're going to walk with you through this process every step of the way. And so that's what mentors do. They train small group leaders. And of course, there's one person in the parish, you might say, who's there to really serve the mentors. And so whether you have been asked to be a leader or a mentor, whether you feel really equipped or maybe not equipped to do either of these two, that's okay. That's why we're together. That's what we're doing in this formation today and subsequent Saturdays. The key is I want you to think about these people, though. I want you to think about the people in the small group. I want you to think about the people in your parish who, if they said to you, hey, I'm ready to grow and I want to be a disciple. And imagine if we had great resources for them. And imagine if we trained you. Imagine if we had that favorable environment parish, what might happen in people's lives, right? So a leader and a mentor are essential to the process because the small groups need to be led by small group leaders. Small group leaders need to be trained. And there needs to be one person in the parish who is our lead contact who can be trained to be the leader of the leaders, you might say, or the trainers of the trainers. What have you been asked to do? Well, you have been asked in the fall of 2018 to be part of a team of people who are going to walk people through the art of living. In the fall of 2018, we're going to release our first semester. That's that semester that we just talked about, that is about who am I? What does it mean to be a human? And how has God called me to give my life to him? These 4 semesters, right? The fall of 2018, we're going to zero in on that first one, that first semester on anthropology, that first semester on what is it, my purpose in life. In the fall of 2018, we're going to have small groups forming in parishes, and we're going to need your help, helping people understand the importance of small groups. In the fall of 2018, as we kick off our first semester on the anthropology, we're going to need your help training the leaders of those small groups. Specifically, when we get into the fall of 2018, what kind of time commitment are you looking at, and how long is the commitment? Well, first of all, the length of the commitment is as long as Jesus Christ is calling you. It's important for us to be reminded that the invitation here is coming from God, not necessarily from your pastor. And so we want to encourage you to know that Jesus is the one who's calling you, and we only want to support you and have you in ministry as long as you are actually walking through you're being called by Jesus Christ. How much time during the week are you going to have to give, you might say? Well, I think it's safe to say that you could probably bank on that when the classes are unfolding, you might say, that you should probably account for about 1 night per week, 10 weeks during the fall and 10 weeks during the spring, 1 night per week, and maybe another couple hours a week where you're connecting with other people in formation. You may or may not be a small group leader, and you may just be using that 1 night per week in other ways. But as far as a time commitment goes, I know that some of us are really wanting to know what exactly you're getting into. Probably in the fall of 2018, looking at a night per week and looking at a couple hours outside of that where you're going to be just nurturing people, supporting people with coaching and things like that. Now, of course, the Art of Living is 4 semesters. It's 2 years. We would ask that you are able to commit to that first 2 years. And then after that, the Lord might call you into walking with us more or into other things. But that's specifically the commitment that you're committing to in the beginning of fall of 2018. Let's take a look at some other commonly asked questions that I've heard so far, and let me walk you through some of them. What if my team is not complete? What are we supposed to do then? We don't have 4 people yet, and if you don't have 4 people on your team, what are you supposed to be doing? That's a great question. Just keep trusting the process. Keep praying, keep asking. If you are maybe only have 2 people of your 4, keep working with your pastor. Every pastor has a liaison, and we want to make sure that we continue to support you there. But don't give up. Trust the process. This video can be a real help to people. We also have another video that I'm going to show you that can be a help to people. But just keep persevering and keep discerning and keep asking the Lord. Number 2, what if my pastor has not appointed a leader? That's okay. If your pastor asks you to be a leader or be a mentor, or maybe he just has 4 people and nobody's been designated, that's okay. We have a process on our end as we work with your team that we're gonna lead your team through some discernment if that's necessary. That does bring up a second question that goes along with that, which is about you as a team going through formation. It's important that you hear the call to develop a little community amongst yourselves. In other words, people are going to be looking to us as models of this. And if we're asking people to be in a small group and stay committed, then what we ask people to do, we ourselves are being called to do. And so if you, as you look at the 4 people from your parish entering into formation, we are going to have 2 different tracks, but we're asking that all people from your parish, to the extent possible, are in the same track together so that you're walking through the process together as a community. Another question that people have asked is, during these nights where people are starting with the meal, do you have to provide that meal? No, of course you don't. That's up to the group itself. No pressure on you. You're not going to be cooking a bunch of meals for people. You're just going to be helping the small group leaders understand what they're responsible for. Another question that people have asked, what if I need to miss one of the PMD sessions? The PMD, that's the Saturday session, okay? We'll get into that in just a couple seconds. But what if you have to miss some of the formation on Saturday? Some of you already have weddings on their calendar, or you might have other vacation time on your calendar. What if you have to miss one of the sessions? Let me say this. It's not a question of if you miss a session. I think the greater question would be why. In other words, if you're missing a Saturday because just something of life happened, sickness happens, God forbid, a death happens, you go on vacation because it was already on the calendar, that's okay. But if we're missing Saturday formation because we don't believe in it, or because it's not helping, or because I want to go deer hunting instead, then it's the why that is really more important than the missing something, right? Mm-hmm. So if you miss one of the Saturday formation classes, we can get you the material through the team that you're going through formation with. We can even work with you individually if we have to. Most important thing is to know that the formation is designed to help you. And we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. When will the dates for the time of formation be posted? Those are actually online right now. Let me show you where you can get the dates for the formation. So we're going to go to our website here. And if you go to the website and you click on the strategic planning button right there on the home page, right? Then what's going to happen is on the far left here, you're going to see all of these menus. At the bottom, it says 10 Parish Adult Mentors. Click on that, and it says Mentor Formation Course, Group 1, right? And it gives you all the dates. Group 2 gives you all the dates there, all right? So as you are interested in the dates, that's where they are. One more time, how do you get there? You can go to the home page of the website, click on the strategic planning button. Then the left menu, it says Parish Adult Mentors, and then gives you the dates of everything right there. Also reminds you that the classes are on Saturdays from 9 to 3. Our first meeting is coming up on October 7th for Group 1, October 14th for Group 2. Those most times will be at the Pastoral Center. If it's not the Pastoral Center, then of course we will let you know where those are going to be. All right, so if we go back to our questions here, what if my team, where can I go for more information? Well, you can go to the website. The website's a great place for you to go. The website is designed to be kind of like a clearinghouse of information for us. And so if you need information in regards to anything about the adult formation or the strategic plan, it can be there on the website. If you have specific questions that you can't find answered for you on the website, then let us know. That way we can put it there for you. Or if you have suggestions on how to more easily find information, then you can just let us know also. So our job here is to communicate well with you. Our job is to form you, to shape you, to give you resources. And if we can do that more easily, then you just have to let us know what that might look like. Let's go through some more questions that are coming through right now. It says, will leaders, mentors be allowed to be small group leaders? I think that's a good discernment. Certainly, I think it's important for you to be honest with what your own balance of time is going to look like. And so one of the things that you're going to hear over and over throughout all of our formation is the central charism to discernment. And we don't want to simply make decisions on our own. Remember, we want to partner with Jesus Christ. And so if God is calling you to lead a small group, then great. If God's not calling you to lead a small group and God's just calling you to work with the other small group leaders, then we want to respect the call. But the key is in the discernment. So it's a yes, but it's a yes to what he's calling you to rather than to what our expectations might be. Another question, it says, as a mentor team, do we need to go through the same group 1 or 2? Yes. Let me show you that again here. What we're asking you to do as you are going through the formation is to go through that formation together. So if you go again to the website and you take a look at the dates here, again, where am I? Go to the home page. You should not get there before me now, right? Click on strategic planning. Number 10, adult mentors, the dates. We have 2 groups. We're asking that your parish, your 4 people, pick one of the groups, and then you all 4 go through together. So we are asking that people, if possible, go through the formation together, because what it's going to do is it's going to strengthen your relationships with each other. Okay, will we be the small group leaders, at least initially in 2018? We are going to coach you through the process on how to reach out to other parishioners and ask them to serve as small group leaders. So we want to make sure that what we're asking you to do is realistic. If the circumstances in your parish are such that the discernment between us and you with your pastor is that you are the small group leaders initially, then certainly we're open to that discernment. But we're actually thinking that we will be recruiting other people to lead the small groups, and that the 4 of you who are going through the formation would just be resourcing those new small group leaders. So we are hoping to get more small group leaders there in your parish. Is there a prayer team supporting this initiative? We have a small prayer team right now, but we are wanting to get more people interceding for us. So if you have an interest in that, or if you know people who would be interested in helping us with intercession, if you could contact Kristen, and she would be more than willing to either plug you into other people who are praying or to take those names, but that's going to be an essential piece of our being protected. How are we going to put together the small groups? That's a great question. Lots of good questions today about the small groups. I love the questions. Yes, we are going to get small group leaders in a variety of ways. Think about how we found you. We found you not just by making pulpit announcements, but we found you by working with your pastor and discerning with him. You know, one of the big things that we have found across the board with people, and just want to share my heart with you here, is there's a natural fear that people don't volunteer, right? So we've all been there before, right? We've asked people to volunteer for CCD or for youth ministry, or we've asked people to sign up for different ministries, and it just seems like that's not working the way it used to, or less people are signing up, right? And so I think a lot of us might be concerned that we're going to have maybe some people who want to go through the formation, but we're not going to have the people who actually volunteer to be small group leaders. And if that's where you are, I just want to, I want to say I'm there with you, right? It's a natural fear that a lot of people have. And if that's where you are, I just want you to be reminded that our experience so far of working with the pastors and the implementation teams in your parish, asking God to show us who the names are, praying through those names, and then the pastor making a direct ask, has really borne a lot of fruit and has been something that has been a beautiful strategy for us right now. So I just want to encourage you to know that we will be recruiting more small group leaders the same way that we're doing it now. Now, how do people sign up for a small group? We're going to walk you through that process in the spring. We do have a way that we have seen is working in other parishes across the country, and so people will be encouraged. But we do have a process that we're going to walk you through as we enroll people to participate in a small group. What kind of prep are the groups going to have to get together? Well, we of course are going to form small group leaders before we actually get into small groups. We're going to teach you how to do some of that, and we're going to provide lots of resources for them. So that'll be a combination of us working with you working with the new small group leaders, and us all doing that together. But we are going to provide some formation before we start the small groups. Great question here. How do we handle new people wanting to come into the program down the road? I would expect that as this takes off, it will prompt others who passed on the initial invitation. Will they want to join in the current semester, or will we be starting over periodically? That's a really good question. So again, if you can follow the question here, if a parish starts semester 1 and people pass on that in the fall of 2018, are we going to be starting new semester 1 groups a year later or 6 months later? Again, that's up to the discernment of the parish. We want to respect the rhythm of life in the parish, and whatever we do, we want to do well. And so that has a lot to do with the resources that are in the parish, the people that we've had time to train. I would say that we want to follow what God's doing in your parish, but whatever we do, we want to do well. So it would be our hope that we're not just starting new groups to start new groups, or we're not starting new groups to chase numbers. We want to make sure that whatever we provide in parishes, the people who are leading that ministry feel confident and competent to succeed in that ministry. And if that means we slow down the process a little bit to make sure that we are serving people well, then I think people will understand that in the end. Next question, when will the additional dates for formation be posted, not the PMD dates? We're adding some dates in addition to PMD that are specific to training of forming group leaders, how to facilitate why we worship, etc., etc. So we do have some new resources that are coming around the corner. We're really excited about the why we believe and the why we confess and why we worship series. Let me walk you through what all that looks like together. So right now, we know that if you go to the website, so just so that we're all on the same page here, if you go to the website, again, go to the home page, we are very familiar that we have the why we believe. And that is, of course, a resource from Dr. Brent Petrie. And that resource is, it's designed to help people grow in a variety of ways. If you're not familiar with why we believe, cannot encourage you enough to get there. Here's a good thing. Right now, we're focused on why we believe. These are the 8 topics that we're covering right now. In Advent, we're going to be covering a new topic. In Advent, we're going to be releasing videos on the sacrament of reconciliation and why we confess. So this Advent's going to be focused on why we confess, and then in Lent of next year, we're going to be providing a resource on why we worship. In other words, the Mass and the sacrificial nature of the Mass. And so we are going to be providing training for people who might be using those resources. Those dates, we think those dates would probably be available. We'll probably post those in the next couple of weeks, maybe. So come back around October 15th, and we'll be in touch with you. All of you who are listening today, you're now in a family that we're going to be walking with. So as we walk with you through the Saturday formation, we'll be providing to you other information regarding other things that are happening across the diocese when it comes to formation. So. Next question that came in, is there any way to video the classes? I would prefer this to getting notes. That's a great question. We'll have to ask our good friends at the Catholic Leadership Institute if we are able to video the classes or even have audio recording of the classes. But depending on what our conversation with them is, we can let you know. But that's a great learning aid there. Can we attend the opposite class if we miss the one we're scheduled for? That's a great question. Let me offer you this, because most of the classes are very specific to the small group, and because we do have slots per class, it's important that you at least communicate with Kristen before we make that assumption. So, for example, if your parish, if the four of you are in group 1 and one of you has to miss a Saturday, and you're hoping that you can make up that class in group 2, before you make that assumption, communicate with Kristen so that we are able to give you good information. Sometimes that's going to work, and sometimes that's not going to work out. And there are other ways that we would want you to be able to participate in the formation there. So check with Kristen before we make that call. Again, if you have any other questions, you can send those questions to Kristen. Hopefully today has been helpful for you in regards to some of that. But let's go ahead and move on if we can after taking a 2-minute break. So some of you may need to go to the restroom, maybe you want to get some coffee, but let's take a quick 2-minute break. We'll come back, and when we come back, I'll walk you through what we're going to be looking at together. When we come back, we're going to together move into how the formation starts with you, and then we'll go into our homework, getting ready for our first class. So let's take a quick 2-minute break. We'll come back and we'll wrap things up together. Okay, we want to welcome you back. This is Father Mark. Great to be with you. I'm looking forward to our last lap around the track together. I want to offer a little bit more comment on our small groups, and great questions coming in. I think the thing that most excites me about a conversation like this today is that we can answer the questions that you have. And if things like this are helpful, just imagine what happens when we're all together for the formation, where we have a lot more time in person to do this together. So lots of you have asked questions about small groups, small group leaders, and your role. So let's walk through those three things one more time together. Here's what excites me. The fact that you're asking these types of questions, to me, indicates that we're right there together, that you're getting the importance of the structure, which is really a great sign. So the fact that you have questions indicates that you're there, which is awesome. Small groups. How do we get people into small groups? Lots of different ways that we're going to have. We'll have a media campaign. We'll have a campaign in parishes. So the same way that we got people to know more about the Brink Petrie resource that we're using now, we'll have another campaign to help people in the fall of 2018 enroll in being in a small group. We have a whole way that we're going to help you with that. Small groups are led by a small group leader. How do we find leaders for the small groups? Well, we will discern with the pastor, with our parish implementation teams, the same way that we discerned in inviting you. Number two, your pastor will make some direct invitations to people that he thinks are going to be there. And number three, you're going to be involved in that, right? So we want to consult with you about who you think would be good small group leaders, as your pastor consults with you as to other candidates who might lead a small group. Your pastor may make a direct invitation, or it might be appropriate that you make that invitation. Whatever that looks like, we're gonna have a process of getting people to be small group leaders. Many of you, as you said yes to this ministry, thought that you were going to be a small group leader also. So let me offer a little bit more clarity. If that's where God's calling you and you want to do that, and if that's what your pastor wants, absolutely, you can be a small group leader. It might be that your parish has that structure and that's the call. Awesome. However, it might be that the number of small group leaders is such that you just don't have enough time to be a small group leader and do the training. So I want to say yes, many of you can be a small group leader if that's the call, absolutely. But it's not a requirement that as a mentor or a leader that you're a small group leader, if that makes sense, right? So there's the freedom to do it if you want to, but there's not the expectation that everybody has to do that. Okay. The leaders are being asked to commit to additional meetings. How soon will we find out when those would be? What we're talking about is we're going to have resources available in your parish for Advent and for Lent. The way that those are going to roll out, those are going to roll out in a variety of different ways. We're going to keep you in the loop on how those resources might help your parish. But the most important thing for you to hear today is that you are being asked to commit to that Saturdays of formation. And we will let you know how the additional resources, Advent and Lent, play into your formation. And we'll let you know those dates in October. So I don't want you to think that you're committing to Saturdays and all of a sudden we have 17 more dates that we want you to have to commit to. I apologize if that was confusing. So let me see if I can say it more clearly. You're committing to Saturdays of formation. Over the fall of 2017 and the spring of 2018. In the fall of 2018, we've got things going on in your parish right now that you may or may not be connected to. That's okay. We are going to release something in Advent on confession, and we are going to have something in Lent in parishes, the Lent piece is going to weave into your formation, and we're going to give you all those dates of how that all plans together, probably by your first or second class that you have with the PMD. So those dates will be given to you, but I don't want you to fear that there's a lot of extra stuff that's coming down the pike other than your Saturdays of formation that we've already encouraged you to engage with. Okay, so let me hit pause for 1 second. Let me ask one quick question. Okay, one last question. We just had a live question flying in. We had a homing pigeon that flew in with a question, and we gave it to Kristen. One final question about these dates so that we can all rest. You're committing to Saturdays of formation, and that's what we are asking you to do. That's the most important thing, okay? Some of you have been designated by your pastor to be a mentor, and your role is going to be to train small group leaders. For those of you who are mentors and your job is to train small group leaders, somewhere in January, we're going to have an opportunity to help you train some small group leaders who would be engaged with the Lent process. When we meet with you for your first session at the PMD, we'll do the best we can to give you all those dates so that it's really clear. Our hope today was to give you the big picture and to help you rest with some of the details. But if it would help you to have all of those concrete dates, then we promise to get that to you by your first class with the PMD, if you're a mentor. Because in January, as we look at using the Lent resource as a way to train small group leaders in your parish, we'll give you those dates. If you're a mentor. If you are a leader, you're going to have some responsibilities as a leader that are different from a mentor. And there are going to be some times where we're going to want to spend some time with you so that you feel confident in that. So if we could just agree today that there was a lot to cover in the orientation, we'll have all those concrete dates for you, hopefully by our first session with you. That way you're real concrete, you can see everything on paper. That might help us to rest with the additional dates today. So if that is confusing as mud, at least we know that there's what the mud is, and we'll get those dates to you concretely by our first PMD together. Which brings us to a great question, which is, what is the PMD? I know a lot of us have had questions about that. So let's walk through that together if we can. Our formation starts with you. There's a great line from Pope Paul VI. He said that people don't listen to teachers, they listen to witnesses. And if they do listen to witnesses, it's because they are first teachers. Let me say that to you again. People don't listen to teachers, they listen to witnesses. And if they do listen to teachers, it's because they are first witnesses, right? We live in a world where people are as much wanting to trust the content as they are the person who's giving them the content. We have great content, but if people aren't walking the walk, right, then the people aren't going to listen to what we're talking about. So our witness, our modeling for people is just as important. So if we're asking other people to be formed as disciples, right, that means that we ourselves need to be modeling what that formation looks like. So how do we help you? Our formation starts with you. The most important thing that we can do to help your parish is for us to help you in your personal formation. So the first aspect of formation that we want to introduce you to today is called the Parish Missionary Disciple Program. It's called the PMD. The PMD is a resource that forms leaders in parish ministry. And it's facilitated by the Catholic Leadership Institute. CLI has crafted this beautiful formation program called the PMD, Parish Missionary Disciple Formation Process. The PMD, that's our Saturday classes. So these Saturdays from 9 to 3, when we gather at the Pastoral Center, that's the formation that's designed to help you grow in your relationship with God. What do our Saturdays look like? Well, it's from 9 to 3. It's 10 Saturdays over 11 months. So we'll start in October, we'll have November, and then, of course, we will we'll take December off, right? So it's 9 to 3. It's at the Pastoral Center. Sorry, it's 9 to 3:30. Just picking up that little error. It's my fault. 9 to 3:30 on Saturdays at the Pastoral Center. The dates are on our diocesan website. We have 2 tracks. Now you might be saying to yourself, "That's a lot of time, Father Mark," and that's true. It is a lot of time. So let me just first say, I appreciate your investment. I know that we're given a lot to give to these Saturdays, but let me tell you, you're important. Your life is important. Your formation is important. I have to say that as a priest, I've watched the church ask a lot of people, and we don't always do a good job of forming people. So my encouragement is for you to trust that the formation that's provided on Saturday is going to be really helpful for you. The teaching of the Parish Missionary Disciple Formation, the PMD, this formation that we're giving you, is much about forming you as a disciple as it is as forming you to do something in the parish. So again, I want to go back to the question that was asked about, can we videotape the teaching if we can't make it? Well, look at it this way. A lot of what's going to happen on those Saturdays is going to be for your personal growth. And as you're being eventually trained to help people who are going to be in a small group where there's personal sharing, then that's actually part of our learning style. And it's part of the teaching. So there'll be some small group. There's a small group dynamic to our Saturdays together where you're going to be growing in relationship with other people in your parish or the leaders in your parish. You're going to be growing in your experience of God and your relationship with the church and your knowledge of the church. And so our Saturdays together are going to be really awesome. I'm looking forward to them. I appreciate you sinking a lot of time into it. But the invitation is for us to hear that it starts with us now. It starts with us growing in our experience of God so that we are more able to be a witness to other people. So as we look at starting with us, I encourage you to understand that God has great things for you. So what's your homework? What can you be doing over the next couple of days to get ready for the first week together? Well, the first is to pray, and would simply really encourage you to know that God has great things in store for you. But as God is calling you, God's the one who wants to talk to you. So your prayer, I think, is really important. Number 2, to learn as much as you can about the strategic plan. And again, let me take you to the website where some of these resources will be helpful for you to see. So if you go to our website, right? If you go to our htdiocese.org website, and you go to our homepage, click on strategic planning, and then if you just click on videos, right? Lots of videos that are there to kind of help you learn more about the strategic plan. Some of that might be helpful for you. Of course, there are videos on the purpose of the parish, what is strategic planning, what's a missionary disciple, things like that. There's a great little series of videos right here on prayer. And I've given you 7 very quick and easy videos that might help you in your prayer. That might be a good place for you to start right now as you are preparing for our first missionary disciple training day, which is coming up in October. You can also learn more about strategic planning if you go to it says right here, implementation team resources. We have resources there for our implementation teams. We have some of the videos that are there that we're going to migrate over to section 10. But those are videos that help you understand aspects of the strategic plan that are not necessarily out there for the public audience, just because of the specific nature of what we cover. So learning more about the strategic plan so that you feel confident and sharing that with other people will be a specific way that you can get ready for our first session. And then, of course, just get in touch with your heart. What is it that you desire as you walk into the first weekend? I think that would be very helpful for us also. You are going to be formed. And so taking stock of where you are is an important piece of the puzzle. So pray, ask the Lord to be with you, and pray for us. Number 2, learn more about the strategic plan and look inside your heart. That will be really helpful. What we will do on our end is a couple of things. This video will be available online. It'll be on the YouTube channel. It'll also be available in that section 10 on the website, which is that section that's just for you, for the parish mentors. We will also, over the next couple of days, type up answers to some of the questions that you asked so that there's clarity in the answer. I know that for some of the questions that were asked today, perhaps the precision in our answering those questions could have been a little tighter. And so we'll give you some written answers to some of those questions to help you out with that. And then as far as the dates go, I know that dates, those practical things are really important to all of you. We'll see if we can get those dates in the FAQ that we'll put on the website, and we'll have all that for you on our first session, which is coming up in a couple weeks. For those of you who are part of parishes and you do not have your 4 people, that's okay. Again, just continue to pray for your pastor. Maybe reach out to your pastor, see if there's anything you can do to assist him in that. If you have any questions that were not answered today, you can send those to us, and we'll see if we can get those online for you so that we have concrete information for you that will help you rest and everything. Most important piece of the entire puzzle is to remember that you're being called by God. And if you can remember that, then just trust that he will guide you through the process of formation, and he will guide you through the ministry that he's calling you to. It's been a real gift to be with you. If anybody has any specific questions that you want to send to us, you can continue to give those to Kristen. We can send those emails back to you. But until we see you, either on October the 7th or on October 14th, may God bless you, bless your parish, and we look forward to starting the journey with you. God bless you.